Welcome everybody. We are shooting today another episode of a Safer Gambling Talks. I have the pleasure today to be here with Rob Mabbett, the Engagement Director of Better Change, and also with Dave Richardson, or David Richardson, who is the Head of Strategic Partnerships. So welcome guys, and you both are working for Better Change, which is a company with unique approach towards player protection and gambling related harm, and we will talk about it later. What is that unique thing? But before that, I wanted to start like straight away and kick it in by focusing on the both of you. So both of you had a different journey before today, so when you are working for Better Change, and I want to ask you a question. Why are you working in a sphere of gambling, and what makes you continue? We can start with you, Rob.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think everyone I've spoke to when I've worked in the gambling industry, no one's kind of said, "Oh no, this was what I was going to do from school. This is like my ambition to work in the gambling industry." It kind of finds us. I started in the gambling industry in 2012. I started as a cashier in a land-based bookmaker, so I literally started at the entry level after taking a bit of a career sabbatical from retail. So customer service and things like that were part of my skill set, but also I had an enjoyment of sports and I had an enjoyment of betting as well. I would bet on sports, but also play, sort of refer them to slot games now, but maybe won't go into how old I am, but kind of old-fashioned fruit machine games and such like that in the pubs and such. So being able to sort of marry those two skill sets was appealing. So my day-to-day work would be around something that I enjoyed. I got to talk to people about sports and betting and what's going to happen. And we're now, 12 years later, it's 2024. That's me dating your podcast. But it's no, seriously, it's been 12 years that I'm really proud of the work that I've done, and I still learn new things, meet new people. When you go to some of the events all around Europe, it's amazing what was beyond sort of the four walls of the betting shop. It's this whole world of iGaming and land-based and casino, and it's varied, it's vibrant, it's forward thinking. There's technological arms where we're looking at, we're right on the cutting edge of modern tech, but there's also a great tradition behind it. And the people are great. My career has been supported by a number of people that I feel greatly indebted to, and I think we've got a great opportunity here at Better Change to kind of help other people with that leg up and spread a bit of the positivity. So I'm 12 years in, but I think many more. I'm really proud to work in the gambling industry, and I really enjoy it. So.
Right, yeah. I'm having the same feeling. Like once you start with gambling, it's not that easy to get away from it.
No, for sure.
Even as a profession. So Dave, how it was with you? Why gambling, and what makes you continue in this industry?
I think Rob spoke really well then about why I work in the industry, because it's an enjoyable place to work, and if you can enjoy your work and enjoy the people you work with, it goes a long way. The reason I got into the gambling industry was purely a personal thing with connections and networks. I got introduced to our founder of Better Change, Victoria Reed, through a mutual friend. We had conversations about Better Change. She was really the initial stages of starting the business, and I found it really fascinating. I've always enjoyed gambling. I've been involved in gambling virtually my whole life from a customer point of view. My dad used to manage betting shops when one of his first ever jobs was at Ladbrokes. So there is really that historical link to it as well. And growing up, I understood gambling, and I've always enjoyed it, especially sports betting. And then when I got speaking to Vicky, it really opened my eyes to a different side of gambling and why Better Change was being set up. And then time went on, and I eventually started working with her, the first employee of Better Change.
Right, so you can even call it a coincidence, right, to be working in the gambling industry.
At no point did I go out of my way to think I want to work in the gambling industry, I'm going to find a job in the gambling industry, but I think that's what makes it a really nice fit as well.
Yeah.
I think it's very natural, and what I've found, to answer the second part of the question, is when you're in the gambling industry, why would you want to leave it? I think there's so much to be done. It's not a mature industry in many aspects. It's still in its infancy with so much to do. And I think that's really exciting because you can actually make a lot of impact in what you're doing, and you get to meet so many great people and visit so many great places in the industry, and it's a real worldwide industry. So yeah, why would you want to leave?
Yeah, thank you for it, because I can relate to it very well. It was a coincidence for me as well. So I was looking for a new job, and the job was saying the project manager for exciting global opportunities. And before I came to the interview, I didn't even know what it's going to be about. And yeah, here I am. And the thing is about this not being that major, I think that's something that is driving a lot of people, because there is still so much work to do, but so much new to explore and to contribute it. So it's very, very good to hear it from this perspective. Even though I don't know how it is with you, but if I tell anybody from my circle or at home in Bratislava that I work in the gambling industry, quite often you will get frowned upon. Like, yeah, so you are with those guys, right? And then comes explaining, and is it similar for you still?
You do at first. I think it's really funny when I first started working as a bookmaker, so traditional gambling activity. It wasn't like I was working in HR or security or something. I was there taking bets and all the rest, and I always remember going to a relative's party, 60th party. It was an outdoor birthday party, and that side of the family were quite, it was I won't say it wasn't formal, it was quite relaxed, but there was a lot of people coming that you'd maybe not met, and they'd be, so Rob, what are you in? What do you do? And I work in betting shops and everything, and they're sort of, oh, gambling, okay, and that was kind of it. But then later on, as people maybe had a couple of drinks and everyone was a bit more comfortable, it was, what's the biggest bet you've taken?
Oh, yeah.
What's the most someone's won? What's the most someone's lost? Have you got any tips? I still get asked now, have you got any tips? Someone stopped me out when I was having a walk the other day and gone, oh, what have you got 5 tips to follow in the races? And so people are fascinated by gambling, whether they frown on it or not. And a lot of people, even then, they're still probably unaware that they're actually probably gambling as well. They might play national lottery games or something like that, or oh no, I don't gamble, but I dabble in stocks and shares, which for some reason seems to be a more appropriate way, or I invest in crypto or something like that. But it's so ingrained in our culture, in our language, with what we do, predicting the outcomes of things, games of chance, the roll of a dice, the turn of a card. It's within our culture, and it has been for hundreds of years. I don't see why we shouldn't embrace that as a instead of sort of being a bit, oh, this is naughty.
So how it has been for you there? Because it's been more than 3 years, roughly 3 years that you are in a gambling industry.
It's actually 3 years next week, as I sit here right now, since I started working with Better Change and Vicky, and it was a baptism of fire, really. It was kind of straight into it. We were a startup business at the time. I knew about gambling from a gambler's point of view, but really having to research and find out about the industry as a whole is fascinating. There's so many different stakeholders in the industry, and there's quite a nice cyclical nature to sat here now on the podcast, because you were one of the first people I ever spoke to. I genuinely think it was probably my first 2 weeks of working there.
Yeah, I remember that.
We had a video call, and I got on LinkedIn, and I reached out to a few people in the gambling industry, and honestly, from that point, there were so many people who didn't need to come back to me, but come back to, oh yeah, I'll have a chat with you, I'll talk to you, I'll point you in the right direction. There's so many great people got in touch with me, and you were the first person actually I spoke to on a video call from Better Change who was external, and I was sat in like a booth in one of the offices, and we had a chat for probably an hour, and you were telling me all about Casino Guru, what you do, your history in gambling, and I was saying, I'm really new, I didn't really know what to talk about, but we were talking for an hour about what we want to do, and 3 years later, I think if we actually took time to look at where we were then and where we are now, as 2 businesses and 2 individuals maybe, it's been really exciting. And since then I've seen you in various countries around the world and various events and various conferences, so it's really good to be sat here now
it's when you think about it, the people around safer gambling, it's kind of a small community. So every time when these events are happening, not every time everyone attends naturally, but it's like, these journeys go like this, and then there is a cross through, and it goes up and down. And even though there is not something specific that you do together, it's like, the community is strong around.
Just think how important it is to attend the events and actually see face to face. So from 3 years ago, the difference in the whole landscape to what it is now. And it's not coming to these events just to sometimes sell to people and speak to people you want to do business with, but the conversations you have over a coffee, over breakfast with people in the safer gambling or the third sector, you learn so much, and you're almost educating each other, and you're forming these relationships to be able to call people and ring people and bounce ideas off people. So I do think community is a really good word for it.
Okay, let's take a step back, because I would like to find out more about the journey towards working for a better change now. So, Rob, you already outlined it. You were working for an operator, which was it a betting shop, right?
Yeah.
Brick and mortar, land-based. And I remember that you have won also a prize for it, like the manager of the year or something, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't like to talk about it.
You don't like to talk about it?
I don't like to talk about it.
You don't have to talk about it. But I remember the picture. You were smiling on the picture.
It was an absolute game changer. Mm-hmm. So the Racing Post and SIS. They did an annual competition every year. I think it started in 1987, 1988. Mm-hmm. I just remember because I think the first person who won it, his name was like Willie Dagnall or something. It was like an amazing, old school thing. And I heard about this competition pretty much in the first year I was working, because when I sort of set to task on something, I want to do it well. Whether it's your work or things in your personal life, you want to do a good job. So when I started in the betting industry, I wanted to understand what my customers were doing, what they were playing, and I wanted to understand the different bets that there were. All I was kind of familiar with beforehand was the elements of gambling that I would consume myself. I didn't know about Peyton's Yankees round robins, Liverpool round the clock, and crazy multiple bets and combinations and horse racing form and all the rest of it. Before then I'd just be picking things with some significance to my own life. So right then it was made clear, whenever the latest betting shop manager of the year would be revealed, there'd be some celebrity on the front page of the Racing Post, and that was like the gold standard. That was where you had to get to, and someone basically said, "Oh, you need to know your stuff to do that." So he sort of worked on it, and it was like, well, that's where you want to get to be. And in 2016, after being in there for 4 years, I was nominated. And you went through various stages. You got a question paper. If you got through the question paper, then you get a mystery shopper.
Yeah.
Once you've had your mystery shopper, then you get to a sort of a regional final where there are 24 other people from all over the country, and you go for a day at the races. That was actually at Doncaster Races, and which is Dave's home track, and we. You talk with the judges for the first time. So some of the judges are sort of quite known in the racing community. Some of them are presenters on TV and experts. And I'm sort of sat there thinking I'm this massive fraud. Mm-hmm. They'll ask me about cheek pieces or something on a horse or a tongue strap. And I'm like, food's nice. Isn't the grass is pretty? But you sort of self-doubt yourself. But I knew what the customers enjoyed. And it was the sort of the customer experience that was my sort of passion within the betting industry. When I first started, I found that the relationship between the bettor and the bookie was actually quite adversary. There was a lot of argument. Mm-hmm. One wanted to beat the other, and what we needed to do was get more of a partnership going. That we wanted to facilitate the activity that they wanted to do, give them a great experience. And one thing led to another. We went to the finals in London. I was very lucky to be presented with the trophy from Sir Geoff Hurst, who, for football fans in the UK and England, he's like the equivalent of a Beatle or Elvis or something like that. It's like, one of the footballing gods from the England team that won the World Cup. So it was an incredible journey, but it was what happened after that. It was the fact that it opened doors, people wanted to talk to you, and all of a sudden I realized the worlds that other people operated in, and everyone was so generous.
Yes.
That was really when I thought I wanted to progress.
Yes,
in the industry.
It sounds like an exciting achievement, working on this position and this kind of a job. But then 2 years after, I think, you moved from the operator side, and you basically jumped on the other side of the fence, started working for Gambling Therapy and then for Gordon Moody. So what made you to do this kind of change?
Initially, safer gambling or responsible gambling, it was generally spoke of then. When I was working in the industry, that was when the first responsible gambling week started, and we first looked at it. And actually, that was one of the few areas of growth in the offline industry, the fact that we were now becoming conscious of the need to provide safer gambling tools, make players aware of potential risks, being able to spot issues, being able to interact. This was all very new. Gambling addiction wasn't new, and there'd been services that had been set up for many, many years. Gordon Moody celebrated 50 years not long ago. But proactively interacting, looking for the signs, and taking a little bit of responsibility whilst working in the industry was new. So it was actually an area of growth, and I thought this married with customer service really well. Taking care of your customers should be a given when you're working in any form of, retail service, whatever you want to call it. But the decision to move into treatment and really immerse in the treatment of gambling addiction, everything was a personal one more than a sort of a business decision, because I'd experienced within my own family sort of consequences of poor mental health and consequences of addiction. And I think a lot of people who move into the charity sector, they have a kind of a personal cause to go move into these things. So I was sort of fueled with a sort of a thirst to learn more around what causes addiction, how we can help prevent things, how we can do more. But I knew gambling. So to marry the two, when Gordon Moody were looking for an operational manager for their gambling therapy service, that seemed like a good thing. But I didn't finish the application. I wrote it, and one of my colleagues, who was actually my deputy manager, so maybe he was looking to move me out so he could rise to the throne maybe or something, but he was, have you applied to that charity job yet? No, I haven't done it. And I had the application form on my phone, because it was a digital one, and I sent the application off, I think, about 5-10 minutes before the deadline, which was like midday on a Thursday or something, and he wouldn't let me start my shift until I'd sent this, because he said, that's you and it's a good job. So I had an interview, it came to pass, but the journey's been phenomenal. I've spoke to so many people, we've learned so much from so many people around what goes on, how gambling addiction can be triggered, what we can do to try and prevent it, what we can do to help others on the journey towards recovery and such like that. And it was an incredibly immersive space, and I learned lots of therapeutic techniques. I learned about cognitive behavioral therapy. I learned about how trauma can manifest later in life into something that's difficult to deal with. But it was a very narrow view.
I think all of these are very important when you get to the point where you are now, because it's not about treatment anymore, but it's about focusing on the stuff that is really influential on the journey of the gamblers within the Better Change, and we're going to talk about it later. But I want to focus on Dave now. So your journey is a bit different. So you have come into gambling only from a perspective of a person who enjoys gambling. You were working around the area of sports, but not gambling related. So how was the journey for you, and perhaps even what was the most surprising stuff when you went from one side of a fence to another, kind of a different story. But what was like the thing which might have surprised you the most?
Yeah, so my background is sport, education, coaching, and then project managing in sport at various different levels, from junior sports up to sports travel. And there is such a link between sport and gambling as well. So there's always been that in the background. But yeah, so my journey was all through sport, like you said. 3 years ago, started working at Better Change, like you said. And the big difference was a very different cultural thing. So working in the private sector now, rather than the public sector, and how the industry was so much more than what I perceived it to be from one side of the fence. As someone who gambled, you either gamble with a bookie at a race course or at a casino or on an app, and really for fun, like with friends. It was a big part of my social life growing up. As Rob touched upon before, I live near one of the biggest racetracks in the UK, so going to the races with my mum and dad as a kid was an enjoyable day out. It wasn't about gambling, it was a really enjoyable day out to see the horses and watch them around the parade ring. And my dad gambled, and what I look back now, he set a really good example of gambling. So you're talking about role models wise, he always used to explain to me about the odds then. And he'd bet genuinely like 50 pence accumulators or £1 each way on a race, but it was about the actual looking at the horses. What do you like? What do you see about it? It wasn't about the winnings.
Yeah. It
was about the experience of having a punt or a bet and enjoying that as part of a social activity. And that's kind of how I grew up with gambling. And I was at university at the time. I went to Loughborough University, a big sports university, so that's where sport carried on. But I was at a time, Loughborough University, when online gambling was started at university. So it was kind of a really big thing. And I remember living with a group of friends like you do, and we were all talking about racing, and we used to watch the Cheltenham Festival as a big thing, and it was the first time we were ever gambling. But I remember teaching my friends who weren't from that kind of background how to gamble. They didn't have a clue what odds were. They didn't have a clue how to place a bet, because we often used to go into the bookmakers as students and put a bet on. But teaching them all that, and when I look back now, and that was 20 years ago, a bit more. But what I'm doing now as a job is there's so many parallels to it. So it's kind of, although I've kind of fallen into it, like I said before, it seems like a really nice progression, and it feels a really good fit. And that's kind of how I fell into the job, but really enjoy it now.
So now you work as a head of strategic partnerships with Better Change. Can you describe a little bit more what does it mean? How does your perhaps a day-to-day job look like? And what kind of partnerships are the ones that you want to establish as part of Better Change?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing. A job title for me is not really the be-all and end-all. Some people get hung up on a job title, but you could call it sales, business development, outreach, partnerships. But the reason why I think this is a genuine strategic partnerships role is because we don't really want to work with people in a transactional way. It's not a case of we've got a product and a service, give us some money and that's done. We might see you again, we might not. And that is a transactional, what I would say is a sales role. What we want to work with people long term. We want to understand how we can support them, how they can support us, how we can grow as a company with them, no matter how big that company is. Because every company's got room for growth. Otherwise they would be stagnant. So the partnerships part, what I want to form is partnerships with people who work in the safer gambling sector, how we can support them and how they can support us, and how we can make a really strong safer gambling community, like we said before. But I want to form partnerships with gambling operators and how we can maybe help them create a sustainable industry and protect their players and prevent harming their players, while also appreciating that they are an operator with a prime target of making money and making sure they don't get in trouble. And as an operator, if they're not getting in trouble, they're being compliant and they're making a profit, they're pretty well along the way of being a successful operator. How can we support that for them? So we're not in a sales role. What we are is in a genuine partnership role, and we want to work with those people over the long term. There's nothing short term about what we're doing, which comes from the top of our organisation. It really is about making those relationships.
It makes a lot of sense, because I feel like it is a process. We've heard many times, even at the conference this week, that a lot of what is shaping safer gambling and the landscape around this in online gambling is the evolution, and it takes time. So if you work on these long-term partnerships, it really makes sense because you cannot do changes like this overnight. So coming to Europe, your job title is the engagement director. So it's a little bit different as I understand it. You joined Better Change sort of like a year and a half after Rob. Describe us a little bit more. What does it mean exactly? Or perhaps what is the distinction between the roles you two have within the company, and what are you trying to achieve with this specific role with your activity?
Sure. The job titles, like Dave pointed out, are they're kind of there. They don't ring fence our activities. You know, I describe Better Change as kind of small and mighty, and we wear a lot of hats, and we're hustling and we're working hard. Working with Dave over the last sort of 18 months, you know, and alongside Vicky, we've kind of fallen into a natural overlap, I think, which is really great. We're always focused on individual stakeholders, working with different organizations, how we can collaborate, how we can deliver projects for them and provide, you know, and generate business. But we also need some more awareness of the brand and how the wider sector will engage with Better Change. We have an idea as to the role we play within the sector in terms of the combined effort to prevent gambling harms. And for us, that is early prevention. So we've got to get that message out there to the stakeholders, which also makes the job easier to then engage with the individuals and the organizations that we work with. So under my remit would fall more of the brand messages around social media, and it would be our purposes and our visions and our values, and sort of getting what was in, you know, Vicky's mind when she decided that we're gonna do this, and make it actual. And then, you know, together we work, and Dave's, you know, pretty much one of the best out there is, make friends and get, well, you know, we make friends and influence people, I guess is kind of what we try to do. But we want to do stuff that sticks. We want to do stuff that makes a difference. And the impact of what we do may seem quite small at the start, but with early prevention of harm, what happens then later on, you know, if someone builds a healthier relationship with gambling and they're more in control, they understand how things work, they don't fall for some of those pitfalls and superstitions and gambling fallacies that are out there, then actually the input of our work, which may well have been planting a seed earlier, is huge. Yeah. You know, we want those organizations that do the work further down the line in prevention, but then further into education, research, treatment, the whole continuum to, you know, to serious harm. We don't want them overloaded. We want them to focus on the people who genuinely need help. I think early prevention of gambling harm from the perspective of people who gamble was a huge gap, which absolutely influenced me to say, you know, tap up Dave and Vicky and say, have you got room for a third wheel? It's trying to get us out there, what our mission is, what our purpose is, engage with the sector, try and change the conversation a little, as well as those more focused relationships.
Yeah, so we are getting to the core of what the uniqueness of Better Change approach is. And I think what you've been saying relates pretty well what Dave was saying about this long-term relationship, long-term support, and with the evolution and basically the flow of time. Because when you put in these seeds at some point, then you can bear the fruits after a couple of months or years, because it just don't happen overnight. But I understand that the Better Change's approach is all around positive play, or positive play is in the core of it.
Sure.
I think we should focus on that now, and if you can tell a bit more about what does positive play means.
In its simplest form, I would say positive play is the experience that you want those who play to have. That their experience of gambling is positive, they're assured of what they're doing, they have a good knowledge of the mechanics of gambling. You know, we refer to gambling literacy a lot. We give people the tools to, you know, empower them to make informed decisions. So a positive experience from gambling, they play positively. But our core of our work is how we work with the gambling operators, the regulators, the trade bodies, the wider sector, to be able to deliver that, to help nurture an environment where people do play positively, to provide those educational tools. And they've got to be engaging. I think we've had a lot of the thou shalt not do this, you shouldn't do that, this shouldn't happen here, we need to ban this, we need to stop that. But people will still make the decision whether to gamble or not, ultimately. So we need to engage with them, at least give them some tools to be able to make better decisions. So creating those environments, helping with strategies, consulting with operators, introducing new ways of new forms of safer gambling tools that engage with the customers, that they're not stigmatized using. It's not like, would you like to set a limit, would you do that? It's like, I'm not a gambling addict, they're not for me. We don't want that. The safer gambling tools aren't for gambling addicts. That's a different conversation. We want to provide an environment where people will use safer gambling tools, but in a positive way, and they'll talk about gambling. I think that's a big thing about it. They would talk about it.
Definitely. I think the whole thing about positive play is not to be mistaken for, we're not encouraging people to gamble. We look at it from a very unemotional point of view. We look at it from a balanced and a professional point of view about how we can support the industry. So, like Rob said, if we're teaching somebody about gambling, so a land-based casino, teaching them one of the games of roulette, for example, teaching someone how to play roulette has a place in a safer gambling sphere. Because if you are playing something what you don't understand and you don't know the rules of, or how to do it, or the chance and the risk and the reward, you're inherently being quite irresponsible. Spending money on something you've got no idea what you're spending it on. So actually, by teaching someone how to play it, there could be critics who say, oh, well, that's just encouraging gambling, but it's a really narrow-minded point of view that I would prefer to spend my money, and people I know, to spend their money on something they knew what they were spending on, they knew what they were doing. So that has got a place in safer gambling, and I think there's a fear to address that a little bit, and I think that's where better change come in, and we want to be disruptive. We don't want to be disruptive for disruptive's sake, but we think there's a place in the gambling industry to cause disruption and actually make it a better industry to work in for everybody, and that includes helping people who potentially could suffer from gambling-related harm as well, but way further up, way earlier than when they are identified as needing harm. So if we do our job properly and people in our area do our job properly, there should be less people needing the support of the services which are really stretched. And there's almost no excuse. There's so many touch points that you could have with a potential customer from when they start gambling to when they need support. And I'm going to come back to Rob here. 12 years from someone. Rehab.
That was. We had to generate. We had to collect data when you're in the treatment sector, and nationally to collect that because it helps inform future decisions and improve. We found that with gambling rehab, it would take 12 years for someone realizing they had an issue with gambling to actually getting the treatment they need. You've got time spent gambling, inactive addiction. You've got times when they will try to self-medicate, they'll try abstinence, they might relapse, there'll be active addiction again, they might go to a professional service, a helpline, talk to a GP. That might work for a bit and then break down. And this is nobody's fault, by the way, in this sector. These are people who are doing their best with the tools that they have. And that's why we have to be very clear on what services we provide, all the way up to the point where they could get to a point where, this is something I need to sort out. And this, the consequences could be quite difficult. That would be 12 years. So
what I was saying, and that's perfect, and that's why it's great working with Rob, who's got that experience from Gordon Moody as well, and from the betting shops, but there's a really long continuum there. And the fact that we are focusing so much of that on people when they, at the end of that journey, there's no excuse to not try and engage with those people way before that. And if your first experience of gambling, 18-year-olds in the UK, if your first experience includes understanding gambling, what gambling is all about, how we don't have to call it safer gambling, having a great experience of gambling through positive play, which would inherently be safer gambling. If your first experience is that, you are actually priming someone to enjoy a lifetime value of gambling and hopefully not need treatment at the end. There will always be people who need treatment. There's amazing organisations out there that do it. But I just think we fit into that we want to work with 100% of gamblers, and then a small percent will find the support they need from other organisations. That's not us.
Yeah.
But we've got a huge market to work with, because we can work with gamblers as soon as they start gambling, and that's positive play. It's not being scared to have those conversations around about gambling and how you can do it properly and how you can enjoy it. So that's where we are.
Yeah, so you were talking about disruption, and this definitely is a disruption. When you talk about it like that, I think objectively it makes sense, because if you are looking at the problems which are happening with a small portion of gamblers, and you are trying to prevent this with the rest of them, and you are looking at these problems only through the lenses of those worst cases, those worst struggles, there is something which from the beginning says like it might not gonna work. And then those 12 years, you've had a lot of conversation about the stigmatization of problem gambling, the stigmatization of even considering that I might be dealing with some issues. So putting this into a perspective that it is normal, that sometimes you would feel you are losing control, and these are the tools that you can use, and it is a normal part of your gambling. Again, objectively, this sounds like a meaningful journey towards it, but still we are talking about the disruption. So I'm curious, how do you see the rest of the industry or rest of the gambling community to be embracing positive play and this approach? Do you see any barriers which could be standing against it?
The biggest barrier is historically a lot of safer gambling measures, whether government regulatory led or anything, do not benefit the business. It restricts, blocks, bans, it alienates players, and by default almost stigmatizes gambling harm and such like. It doesn't benefit. A gambling business would sort of look at that. Why should I do this? Why should I embrace a strategy that is going to potentially remove some of my customers? And what we're seeing is increasing regulation and increasing barriers that are sort of doing just that, and the industry has to sort of navigate what we do. And similarly to the continuum of the consumer, where there is different stages of gambling and different interventions that could be happening, there's also that same thing with the industry, and we want to try and open that up a little bit and show how commercial activity, how compliance activity, how someone who is working in maybe not a safer gambling role per se, but actually contributes to the combined effort of keeping players safe and providing a great customer experience. So we have a model where we marry that together. We look at the commercial aspects, how that can benefit the customer experience. We look at the compliance element, which is what you must do, and we look at the player protection element. You marry those and you look at safer gambling and how people can gamble safer. You look at the reputation of the industry. Yes. If we get a better reputation, we attract better people. We get more people of quality and raise the bars and standards. Again, these make marginal gains in safer gambling at an early stage. And we all look at we look at the customer experience. That's the other element. Finding the sweet spot here allows a whole business to point in the right direction of positive play and giving a great experience. So the barriers are not a lot of what's in that, apart from the basics, are must-dos. And our battle is to sort of say, look, this is what's going to provide business value. This is what is going to aid customer retention. This is what is going to bring customers to your door and improve your reputation. And this is what is going to keep your nose clean from a regulatory point of view. So we have to demonstrate how positive play and our work of better change provides tangible benefits to the business.
I think the biggest barrier is lethargy in the industry. It's like safer gambling, responsible gambling, as it was previously, has become something which is, whatever we do, we're not going to look good. We've got a bad reputation. If one thing goes wrong, it makes the mainstream media forget about all the hundreds of things which the gambling industry has a really positive impact on. So, and I think that there's no motivation for a gambling operator to go above and beyond because they can't win. What we're saying is, why isn't it, if you're an operator and not speaking to us, you need to be speaking to us, because we're trying to change that, and we're trying to change it for the industry as a whole, which includes the operators. And we're doing that by creating a model which, as an operator, you can protect your players, you can improve your CSR, and you can work with us on several different social impact projects or the consultancy side of our business to actually make sure you're not only is your safer gambling improved and you're working on your customer service and you're actually retaining players and acquiring players, but you're also going above and beyond and actually creating an environment where you should be proud to say, this is what we're doing as a gambling industry, this is what we're doing positively as a gambling industry. And it's a real bugbear when you see how the mainstream media report on the gambling industry, for me, especially in the UK.
Yes.
And I think it's very unbalanced. And I think there are still areas where we need to do so much work, because there are mistakes that are made, but there are in any industry. But I think they're so highlighted in the gambling industry. And I'd like to think, might be a bit of a more long-term, maybe a bit crusading, but I'd like to think we want to be a company that helps chip away at that and improve the reputation of the industry. And that comes under the positive play banner.
I think we're invested in that as well. I think that's a big difference. I think we take a responsibility to try and improve the landscape. So for example, if I'm still with Better Change in 10 years' time, and statistically the needle on safer gambling hasn't moved, personally that'd hurt me a little bit. I'd be a bit disappointed with that. And I think, the industry it rolls down to the bottom of the hill, but actually there's a lot of people here in this ecosystem, and we should take a bit of responsibility and a bit of pride in moving the needle. So when the Gambling Commission is saying, we've increased the amount of fines we've put on those, it's like, why are we still increasing fines? Are we not improving? What's happening here? Shouldn't that's not really something to be proud of. And when you see statistics show an increase in gambling issues, and some of the support services, treatment providers, educators and all the rest of it are saying, we need more. It's like, but why haven't we improved it? Why haven't we improved the landscape? What's our responsibility here? But it all seems to roll down, and I think that's where you get that
comes to the point I was making before. As an operator, you're putting so much money, real money, lots of money into safer gambling. It's not like you're short of money. And where's the impact? If I'm an operator, I'm saying, where's my money gone to improve it? Because all I'm hearing is I'm ploughing money and I'm ploughing resource, and I'm employing huge safer gambling teams if I'm one of the big operators, and I'm still being told we're not doing a good job. I'm still being told we're a bad industry, a sin industry. So I think there's a real lack of impact. Any other industry, if you're investing millions and millions of pounds into it, you would know exactly where that's going on the return on investment. We kind of ignore that a little bit, I feel.
Yeah, the gambling industry is still perceived as vice, and even though not all gambling is harmful, sometimes it is portrayed, or the public opinion would be like, yeah, all gambling is bad, you shouldn't even get near to it. And for some people it is true, but there is a still big portion of people who are enjoying gambling positively in a way that they are being entertained, and this is how it should be. But also be aware of the risks. So far, we've been mainly talking about how can positive play help operators or basically organizations within the industry with their players. But what about from the other side? I was engaged in a discussion. We were discussing whose responsibility is it to decrease gambling-related harm, and the players play their part in it. But the question is more about how can we support and motivate players for them to actively consider the gambling harm and to actively work on the decrease of it. And I know that you also work with communities, and I would like to hear a bit more about that. Since it's mainly about sport, you could tell us more about it, Dave. How do you work with this part of the industry?
Yeah, so first of all, you're totally right. There are a group of people who gamble who should not gamble, and that's where the blocking software, that's where the treatment is needed. So there's a group of people who shouldn't gamble. We are not talking about educating them in how to gamble safely, because they shouldn't be gambling. So positive play is about safer gambling for people who can gamble, who should be gambling, who want to gamble. It's not for other people who shouldn't be gambling because they're at real risk of harm. So that's, to be really clear about that, we're not saying it's all right, come back and gamble if we tell you how to do it. Not at all. So one of our projects, which is a close to my heart, being sport related, is we do a fan engagement project. So fan engagement, we can relate it to any sport, but we mainly do it in football and horse racing at the moment. And it's when we go to the actual fans of the sport, we go to the fixtures, we go to the games, we talk to fans about gambling. We don't scare them off gambling. We don't want to tell them all the bad things about gambling. What we want to do is have a balanced conversation, and we want to find out as much about from people who gamble as we can tell them. We find that a lot of the time it's the people who gamble are kind of in the background and they're told what to think, and the media says, well, everyone who gambles is like this or thinks like this. Well, actually we're saying, okay, well, let's go and ask them. So we'll get information from them. We do research, we do education pieces, we do community sessions with clubs and racing. And a great example at Wolverhampton Racers about a year ago now, we were talking to people about what it means to read a race card, what it means to the odds mean. Again, like I said, the casino example before, if you're going to a race meeting for the first time and you don't understand odds, and you put on an each way bet, and you're going to be spending probably double what you think you're spending on an each way bet. And really simple things like this isn't for seasoned race goers. So it's not for everybody who goes. But what it is, it's actually supporting an industry as well. It's supporting the race industry, in that case. It's supporting the gambling industry. And it's actually helping to protect that community. And as part of that, we've touched upon there's so many great companies and organisations in the safer gambling treatment space. We'll signpost to that as well for people who need it. We'll talk to people about how they maybe can identify signs of harm in their loved ones and their friends and their family, and what they should do about that. It's not our role to treat them, that's not us, but what we will do is signpost, and that's where I think this word that we come across a lot in the industry is collaboration comes in. We want to work with all the other organisations in this safer gambling industry.
Indeed. So it's not only about online, and this is the way how even the operators could be working with such communities and to be actively working and engaging with them. Because how I understand it, historically, there was very little incentive for casinos or operator companies or land-based casinos to educate their players about how to play, how the games should be played, and just let them come in and let them being sucked by the environment and by the games, and perhaps they are going to come back. And this is changing, even in the online sector. I was recently engaging about how players understand how slot games works. Yeah. You have thousands of different kind of slot machines, online slots, different teams, different colors, different whatever. Similar RTP, 95, 98%, whatever, but different kind of volatility. And for someone who just out of the blue registers with the online casino, they might have a feeling like this is not paying out. I put on 10 euros or something, make 10 spins, no wins, this is a scam. I will look for something else. I would look on the internet, some other operators, because this is just not working. Sure. And they might go into, unknowingly, they might encounter offshore gambling. So I'm curious, how would you say, Rob, that the positive play and everything which is around it could help with players consciously gambling with their locally licensed operators?
Just before Rob answers that as well, he's made just a picture or something like that. You just mentioned RTP and volatility. How many casual slot players will have a clue what you mean when you talk RTP and volatility? So I'll let Rob answer that question, but that's the point we're talking about. That education needs to go way far. The first time you play a slot game, you should be actually learning about that. So, sorry, Rob.
No, but you make a really good point. You look at how many mobile app games are out there now, and you will play those games, and it'll take you almost through a tutorial that you don't really have much choice whether to do it or not, and it'll show you what all the little parts of the game and the features are before you actually are allowed to navigate the game, solo. For me, ultimately, the decision as to whether to gamble or not will lie with the consumer. So, we're not going to exclude customers or people who may have made that choice to gamble offshore or to gamble with, more risky markets, grey markets, illegal markets, and all the rest of it. If they've got more tools in their, at their disposal to be able to spot things that may be more fraudulent, maybe scams and all the rest of it, then we might have a fighting chance of keeping them a little bit safer. But I think we have a strong focus on upholding the regulated market. If someone is going to gamble, surely this is better in a well-regulated environment with eyes on it, where we can provide various services to react to whatever scenarios are there, whether it be difficult harms or whatnot. So when it comes to advertising, advertising is the right of the regulated market. We heard another operator put that very well. An unlicensed operator cannot market on TV or anything. Internet may be slightly different,
Definitely.
But it's almost like a right. We have jumped through hoops, we've paid our way, we follow a set of guidelines and a set of rules, and that's almost like a privilege, but it gives us an advantage over the regulated market. If we over-regulate, and sometimes I've often said it can be a poor argument to say if we over-regulate, we'll push people to the black market, but I think in the UK we need to look at those statistics in Europe and how much offshore gambling takes place. And we have recently seen that there is an increase in the UK. So we have to pay attention to it. And for me, upholding a regulated market and making it as robust, user-friendly, empowering players to make decisions, that's the way we're going to do it, because ultimately the decision to gamble is the players. No matter what you do, if it's a compulsion, an addiction or anything, it will find a way. It's incredible how far people will go, and not just with gambling but with other addictions, how far they will go to satisfy that craving, that need, that compulsion to do so. So we need to be realistic and aware of that, and not just sort of paint over the cracks and say
Yeah, definitely. I mean, online gambling is not respecting national borders, and then if the players are not embracing how the regulation is shaping the game, how the regulation is shaping their experience, I think the threat is real and is there. But I wanted to move to a different subject. So many companies that are active in this space, player protection, safer gambling, they are embracing lived experience. You do not have lived experience with what you do with positive play. How would you comment on that? Isn't this something that you miss within your organization?
Yes, a really good question. I think that's probably something that makes us stand out a little bit, that we are not based on lived experience. But first of all, we consult with lived experience. And we've done that right from the start of Better Change. We've consulted with lived experience. But the way we look at it is, lived experience has got a hugely important role to play in safer gambling. Some of the stories and the experiences of people, some really good what I'd class as friends now in that sector who've had a lived experience, are really powerful and really emotional. That is really important, that the gambling industry hears them stories. What we're saying is almost, what next, and how are we going to stop that happening to other people? And it's that proactive approach to actually, gambling's still here, it's not going anywhere. That's a really powerful and emotive story, which has got a place for people to hear. But we're saying, okay, and what can we do and work with you as an operator to try and make sure that doesn't happen to other people? And the fact that lived experience is I hear things, people want to change that name, change that terminology now. So whatever the right terminology is, people who've had a gambling addiction and suffered from it is a horrendous experience for them, and the other people in their network, awful. So should we be learning how to gamble and how to sort the industry out from people who've had an addiction? Or could we, and I think there is a place for that, so it's not, I'm saying at all, but how can we learn from people who have really enjoyed gambling and players who've gambled all their life? I was talking to an operator only yesterday, and they've had a person gambling with them for 50 years, the same operator, ultimate loyalty, never gone anywhere else because they've had a really good experience, never had any harm in 50 years, but regularly keeps coming back. How do we learn from those people? And are we scared to learn from those people because it's not seen as the right thing to do? I don't know why. Maybe it's just a historic thing, a fear of change. Yeah. But I've been gambling 20 plus years. Always really, really enjoyed gambling. It's been part of with my family, with my social life. Some of my best memories are gambling, but not gambling for gambling's sake. Gambling's been part of the social experience, whether going to a casino, whether going to the races, whether on a Saturday afternoon having a £5 accumulator on the football matches that really have a great 2 hours chatting with your mates, whether it's in person or on a chat about that accumulator that might come in if someone scores in the last minute. That for me is what gambling should be about. And if you're, in my opinion, if you're gambling only to win money, that must, and I don't know the stats behind this, that must be one of the signs of potential harm. Because actually you should be gambling for a lot more than winning money. You should be gambling because you enjoy the experience and entertainment of it. So to summarise that, lived experience has got a huge part to play. What I don't think it should be doing is driving policy at government level and at higher level on its own. I think it should be a huge spectrum of things that feed into that to make a really educated and balanced decision.
Yeah, I think it's with like almost everything that you need to balance, and you cannot be driving stuff with just one thing. So from my experience, it can be very inspirational. I think it could help tremendously as a peer-to-peer support, because then you have this connection and you are really talking with someone who has been through something like that. And from my discussions with people who are going through difficult times, that could really help.
And so that's speaking to the people who are suffering from harm.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you, and I think that's it. What my point, I think, was that's not suitable for everybody who wants to gamble. Actually learning from somebody who knows how to gamble safely is going to be really beneficial for those people who want to gamble. So and that's the whole thing about we shouldn't have one rule and one way of dealing with the whole audience of people who gamble.
We need to have balance and person.
We do, but there's an in between. It's not like a 1 and a 0, is it? It's not like you are either a safe gambler or it's harm. So, like Dave, I've gambled. I've had a long experience of playing, and I would say absolutely on occasions I've overindulged, got carried away, and experienced gambling harm to a degree, but it's not been catastrophic. It's not had negative effects on wider family or everything like that. Maybe, put me in a bad mood or something, and I've spent a little bit more than I could have afforded, and I might have missed a bill when I was a younger student or something like that. But, I was able to navigate those and sort of get back on an even keel without it being a slide that goes, all the way into a desperate situation. I actually had a great interaction from a pub landlady who said, you've been spending this amount. You and your mates have been playing my machines and spending this amount. And it actually made us think a little bit. But I genuinely feel I've worked with some of the worst cases of gambling addiction in the UK through the rehabs. I've also worked with customers in a shop and probably seen gambling at its best, like you've been at races and sporting events and seen where it's been. I feel I make my gambling decisions and I use safer gambling tools and how I gamble safely. I feel that knowledge has come from understanding gambling and understanding how it works and what's out there. I don't think it's come from a fear of consequence, or so to say, I don't want to end up in this situation, or I don't want to end up experiencing what some people have shared. I think those stories are massively important for inspiring recovery and showing people that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. But I think for me to gamble in a responsible way, and there's always the caveat that this is perhaps without other life experiences that could influence addiction and other things, it's my knowledge of gambling and how it works that, that level of literacy, it probably allows me to gamble a little bit safer. But with anything, if you're half an hour into a slot session and you've had a bad run and your bank's run dry and you're thinking about putting more money in and topping up, you're more likely to do that then than the sober person who hasn't gambled yet, who will think, I will spend £50 and that will be it. When you've spent £50 but you're in the thrill of it and you're high on the experience of gambling, that's why you should put some controls in at an earlier stage and just, Yeah,
it's I've had it in a very similar way. I think it's like the combination of it, because I gamble every now and then, occasionally when it is like, okay, this is the right time. So I once had a bigger win, and that was the time when I felt that something is really trying to suck me in a little bit. that awarding system in my head, I wanted to repeat it. And thanks to my understanding that how online gambling works, how slots work, that this was just me being lucky. And also because I've heard these stories and I was in contact with a person who has been experiencing before, I knew that this big win could done this to me. So I've had the combination of knowledge and it kept me in check, It lasted for a couple of weeks and then it just got away. So
I completely
the right combination, it's what it is for ordinary folks. Like, it can happen to anyone.
There's a little anecdotal story here, and I was telling Rob about this. I was at an event not long ago talking about slots and how the dangers of slots in a way. I'm not an online slots player at all, never really played it, and it was coincidental. I don't know whether Amazon was listening or anything like that, but coincidental, on the way home on the train, I got an email saying 10 free spins, and I used to ignore them. I usually just I'm not interested. And because I'd just been at this event, I thought, what, I'm going to actually have a go on these 10 free spins. And I won about £8 on these 10 free spins. And I thought, it was a regulated UK bookmaker, I won't name the name. And then I thought, I'm going to put the £8 back in, and because it was free. And I ended up winning about £400 from 10 free spins. Never played ever in my life on slots. So I was like, really excited, it was great. But I know exactly what you mean about that. Because I understand gambling and understand where it is, I literally thought, I'm never going to play online slots again because I'm £400 up, and I banked the £400 and I didn't want to play again, but there was that urge to try and play again. And one thing I have to say to balance it out, this is where we can still improve, like I said before. After that point, I was getting so many more regular pop-ups when I was on the app, so many more emails about slots. And I felt like, and it's that education piece, understanding it, I felt like the operator just wanted to win the money back off me. And they were trying to get me back playing slots, which is where I feel the industry does let itself down a little bit at times, and this was within the last year. And because I understand the industry and I work in it, it helped me. So my point there is that the education piece to actually help people understand the industry can really help. But also the second part of that is the industry has still got a long way to go. And I think that's where we want to try and help with those things.
We are having a very nice conversation, but the time has already run out. But I wanted to conclude this with, because we weren't really talking about anything specific that you work on right now, so I would divide two things on both of you. So perhaps Rob could tell us what is the project that you work on at the moment, just briefly, and Dave, something more about the future.
One of the main projects we've been on currently is the training, the educational tools that we're doing around positive play. So a lot of people will have seen our collaboration with US provider RG247 and our concept of bringing the industry together and creating a resource of shared knowledge that then the industry can access free of charge. We also, on top of those, will be running these workshops people can obtain from us, and our work around safer gambling strategies, where we're showing people, this is what positive play is. But also at the same time, our training and everything is compliance grade. It shows you what is the things that you need to do, as well as the things that are good to have and what best practice is. So that has got us in front of a lot of organizations, and that helps us, to then spread the conversation. If you're trying to bring a new concept to the market, you need some early adopters, and that training program has been great, because it hasn't been us saying we do this, we do this, we do this. We've brought the industry together with some genuine collaboration to actually show, actually guys, together, we're good at this, and we have all the knowledge we need, and we share it. So that's been a huge project.
For me, the first time I saw it, this was for me the thing that everybody talks about when they are at the panels, talking about how we can solve this. Yes, collaboration, do more. This is exactly it, because the industry came together and create something which everybody else could take benefit from, which is great. What about the future?
The future. So the training, we've scratched the surface with that. The response to it's been fantastic. It's by the industry for the industry. So we want to build that out, create more and more resource with the industry. So that's one thing. And by the industry, for the industry, it kind of fits everything we do at Better Change. So the future is going to be driven by our partnerships and conversations with the industry. We are not the experts in the room on everything, but what we will do is we'll bring the experts in the room together to find a solution. And that's what I think is a really big strength of ours. One specific thing for the future, we've always worked on a business-to-business basis, really. We've been supporting the industry. Again, from the industry, we've had requests and we've had conversations about how can you maybe support our players with the conversations you've had about gambling. We're not going to get into a point where we're going out speaking directly to customers. That's not our business. Yes. But what we want to do is provide resources for the operators to do that. So watch this space for positive play for consumers delivered via the operators. And that's things like learn to play, understanding gambling literacy. And that can be a really powerful tool if you're an operator. When you first onboard somebody to use your service, you can actually give them some resource, point them in some resource, which actually explains positive play, explains the gambling landscape, and explains how they can get the best out of their product. So that positive play for the consumers is kind of the real next stage over the next probably 18 months, I would say.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that the audience and our listeners did that too. And thank you very much for coming. It was a great pleasure. And